In tonight's news, the nightmare is over.
You get through the day, and you do it day after day after day.
The last American hostage in Lebanon heads home. Brian Mulrooney goes west.
Independence now! Independence now!
The Prime Minister wades into a Croatian demonstration. And a school without walls.
Hi, kids. Well, we're down here about 30 feet.
Bringing science to life.
CTV News with Lloyd Robertson.
Good evening. The Americans celebrated the end of an era today, an era that brought bitterness and misery and death to their citizens. The last U.S. hostage in Lebanon, Terry Anderson, was freed. He had been captive for more than 6 long years. Anderson had been held prisoner longer than any other Westerner, and he had become the very symbol of the whole hostage crisis, a crisis that reduced the most powerful nation on earth to powerlessness. But today was time to start healing the wounds and celebrating the joy of a life returned. Robert Hurst reports.
He was the longest American held in Beirut and the last American released.
Oh, you can't imagine how glad I am to see you. I've thought about this moment for a long time, and now it's here, and I'm scared to death.
Anderson's workmates at the Associated Press had also waited nearly 7 years for the moment.
Yesterday afternoon, my captors came in, brought some new clothes, new shoes, my first in 7 years, and they hurt my feet, by the way. My name is Terry Anderson.
During the kidnapping, Anderson had made several videotapes. On one Christmas Eve, he said, "There is a limit to how long we can last." That was in 1987. During his incarceration, the pictures the kidnappers released, and pictures that were smuggled out, show how he had aged. Over the years, his father died, and then a brother. His daughter was born just 3 months after he was taken. She is now in kindergarten. This week of hostage releases has been the work of United Nations diplomat Giandomenico Pico.
Mr. Anderson, your freedom is a victory for all. Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. I'm very grateful to you.
Please.
Anderson was the person that other hostages credited for keeping them going.
Very happy for Terry. Of all the people, of any of us, Terry's the best.
I was a Marine Staff Sergeant.
And even on the day of Anderson's freedom, he was missing for hours and hours.
I spent the afternoon, interestingly enough, playing solitaire by candlelight and listening to the BBC reporting on my progress toward Damascus. Well, it was kind of fun in a weird kind of way, you know, kind of like listening to your own obituary.
And what happens to the kidnappers? It's believed the U.S. and other Western nations have promised not to hunt them down. And that reflects the mood in the United States. Americans right now want to forget this episode rather than avenge it.
What were your last words to the kidnappers?
Goodbye.
Robert Hurst, CTV News, Washington.
The Lebanon hostage crisis stems from fervent anti-American, anti-Israel, simply anti-West sentiment rooted in the Islamic fundamentalism of Iran. Those emotions were stirred to new highs back in 1979 when Iran's spiritual leader Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile. And it was in that emotional frenzy that Iranian students seized the American embassy in Tehran and took its occupants hostage.
We have been at war with Iran in reality, though not by declaration, since the moment they took that embassy.
The Americans tried to punish Iran economically and diplomatically. Iran's supporters hit back with more acts of terrorism. In 1984, they tried a different tack. They kidnapped Americans and American allies, 57 in all. 11 of them are reported or confirmed dead. But 2 years ago, the Ayatollah Khomeini died, and a more moderate Iranian leadership took over. It began to lose interest in the whole kidnapping affair.
The anger against the United States is going to ease simply, at least on the official level, because of the need that Iran has for loans and investment and technology.
Analysts say there are other reasons as well. The U.S. has settled a long outstanding financial claim by unfreezing Iranian assets. Iran has lost other support with the crumbling of the Soviet Union. And Israel has released Shiite prisoners with the promise of more to come. And all that has led to this.
It's great to be out. I am happy it's over. I would like to put it all behind me.
It's an overwhelming experience to come back and receive your greetings.
There is still a sad note to all this. 2 Germans remain hostages in Lebanon, but negotiations are underway to free them as well. A 30-year-old woman shook with emotion on a witness stand in Florida today. She struggled through tears to give her version of the night in March when she says she was raped by William Kennedy Smith, the nephew of Senator Edward Kennedy. The woman's identity is generally being protected, but the sensational trial was shown live on television as she said she was afraid for her life. Bruce Morton of CBS News reports.
William Smith's accuser spoke today, told the jury of meeting Smith, a nice young man, of giving the nice young man a lift home, walking with him on the beach, told how everything suddenly changed.
I started up the stairs and was at the top of the steps, and my leg was grabbed. I was afraid.
Do you need a break?
No, I will be all right. I was very frightened. He tackled me, and I was on the ground and he was on top of me, and I was yelling, "No!" and "Stop!" And I tried to arch my back to get him off of me, and he slammed me back into the ground, and I got, and then he pushed my dress up, and he raped me, and I thought he was going to kill me. I was telling him to stop. I was screaming no, and I was struggling, and he told me to stop it, bitch.
Did you feel this was an act of love?
Oh, God, no. It's an act of violence.
Then she told of running, hiding in the house. She didn't know why.
I was a mess. I couldn't... I've never been raped. I didn't know what to do.
Defense attorney Roy Black began his cross-examination with a series of questions suggesting that Smith's accuser ducked out of the bar where she met him that evening and went at one point to another bar to meet another man. Her answer to all such questions, "I don't remember." Bruce Morton, CBS News, West Palm Beach.
And still to come in tonight's news, saying no to an early vote. Prime Minister Mulroney rules out a federal election for resolving constitutional differences. And getting tough with paper mills. New regulations for cleaner water.
A high-output 4-liter engine. Anti-lock brakes. And shift-on-the-fly full-time 4-wheel drive. Make Jeep Cherokee the ultimate vehicle for the hustle and bustle of everyday life.
If Timothy Eaton could see his store today, he'd find some things hadn't really changed. There's still a wide variety of quality Swiss timepieces, ladies' wear for every occasion, under fashions for men, moving picture machines of the very latest design, warm, practical slip-ons, all not only at a most competitive price, but with the widest possible selection. An Eaton value that hasn't changed since Timothy Eaton opened his first store back in 1869.
Prime Minister Mulroney gave another indication today of his plans in the battle for Canadian unity. He said the battle won't be fought in a federal election. Mulroney was also confronted by a European crisis during a visit to Alberta. He promised Canada will do all it can for the Republic of Croatia, but that still doesn't mean official recognition. More from Craig Oliver.
Croatia must be free!
The civil war in Yugoslavia intruded on Prime Minister Maruni on his way into a meeting with Calgary business people. He waded into a demonstration by Croatian Canadians and discussed their appeal for Canadian recognition of Croatian independence.
And we want to make sure that the innocent people in Croatia and in all of the surrounding territories don't suffer anymore. And we will take yes, now. We're going to do it now.
Back to domestic politics, Mulroney discussed an elected Senate with Chamber of Commerce members. Then, at a news conference, he said his government is still considering a national referendum as a possible way to consult Canadians. But he confirmed that he will not consult them by holding a federal election as a way to resolve the unity crisis.
And I think that you can safely exclude the question of a general election on taking place in the near future on a question of the Constitution.
When a federal election does come, one of the biggest threats to the Conservative government here in Alberta is from the Reform Party. Manning's Reformers are running in popularity polls here at 40%, compared to only 11% for the Tories. Even some of these well-heeled Tories at a party fundraiser are carrying two memberships, calling themselves Reformed Conservatives. Aware that many Reform Party members are disgruntled Tories, Mulroney warned them about the possible consequences of splitting the vote.
And those responsible will be remembered principally by Albertans as a group that made it possible for the old NDP, Liberal, CLC, Cup W, Shirley Carr, Bob White alliance to form and govern with national energy programs.
Craig Oliver, CTV News, Calgary.
A new poll indicates support is growing in Quebec for a constitutional deal with the rest of Canada. The Angus Reid poll shows 46% of Quebecers would accept Ottawa's latest proposals. That's a 3-point increase in 1 month, and it's up 6 points since the proposals were released in September. The poll shows 45% of Quebecers favor independence. These are challenging times for the Canadian forest industry. At a time when profits are down, the rules are getting tougher. A new set of anti-pollution regulations was announced in Ottawa today that will affect the industry from coast to coast. Dave Wren has the story.
It's not the first time the pulp and paper industry has been told to clean up, but this time Ottawa says it's serious. New regulations are supposed to eliminate dioxins and furans, the two most toxic pollutants from mills using chlorine bleach. The effluent or runoff will still contain about 200 or so other pollutants, but legal limits will be sharply reduced.
You know, it's difficult to have any type of activity that we can label as being pollution-free and in absolute terms.
Ottawa released a study saying Canada will remain competitive in world markets despite tough pollution controls. But when the industry looks at the government's green plan, it sees red.
We're in the middle of market downturns, record losses, and you know, the industry simply couldn't absorb any further expenditures.
The industry is going to comply, but at a cost of over $500 million. The government also plans to amend the Fisheries Act, restricting the emission of solid waste. They, in turn, reduce the oxygen supply in rivers and lakes, choking fish and aquatic life. Water quality monitoring and enforcement will be improved, creating 136 new jobs to ensure compliance. Environmental groups remain skeptical. There are national standards, but they have loopholes.
He has reneged on the commitment to also regulate all of the chlorinated toxic chemicals in pulp effluent. That was something the industry was completely opposed to, and it appears that the government has caved into that.
Environmentalists have demanded Ottawa impose tough national standards for years. They're trying, but it's unclear just how many provinces, especially in the Maritimes, are willing to follow its lead. Dave Wren, CTV News, Toronto.
The product aspirin is adding to its reputation as the little tablet that could. For some time now, many doctors have been saying that taken regularly in small doses, aspirin could prevent heart disease. Now comes evidence that it could also prevent cancer of the colon. The supporting data for that conclusion comes from a massive American Cancer Society study. Dr. Tim Johnson of ABC News reports.
The new research looks at aspirin use in over 662,000 adults who were followed for 6 years to record deaths from colon cancer. The results indicate that people who took aspirin at least 16 times a month for at least a year cut their chances of dying from colon cancer by 40%.
We're not sure why aspirin could prevent colon cancer, but there is evidence that that is indeed a possibility.
Because aspirin interferes with blood clotting, another possibility is that in aspirin takers, early cancers bleed more readily.
If you take a pill that makes bleeding easier, it's possible that a small cancer could bleed sooner and lead to an earlier diagnosis.
So if aspirin might work either by improving the chance of early detection of colon cancer or by actual prevention, who should be taking it?
I wouldn't recommend that everyone run out and start taking aspirin to prevent colon cancer. We don't have enough evidence for that.
Dr. Timothy Johnson, ABC News, Boston.
And coming up, the grounding of Pan Am. The demise of a once mighty giant. But first, empty chairs at the negotiating table.
The Israelis are not as serious as we are in search for peace.
The Middle East peace talks resume amid charges of playing games.
Some people just seem to have all the moves.
As Christmas gets closer, the perfect choice is Home Hardware.
12 drills of drilling, 11 cups of brewing, 10 toasters popping, 9 lights of flashing, 8 razors buzzing, 7 irons pressing, 6 kettles steaming, 5 phones that ring, 4 pots of boiling, 3 boards of playing, 2 blenders mixing, and a dealer in a red tee.
That's me! The GE 600-watt microwave, 0.6 cubic foot capacity with removable turntable, just $169.99.
For a gift you'll be proud to give.
Good evening. In tonight's news, an 8-year-old Winnipeg boy lost his life in a traffic accident this afternoon. In other news, a report of possible cutbacks at the Misericordia Hospital's emergency ward. And in sports, the Jets put their unbeaten string on the line. We'll see you on Late News Hour.
Coming up to Christmas, the smartest families do their shopping at K-Mart. Delicious M&M candies for the holidays, now $2.67 a pack. The Baby Wanna Walk doll can crawl and walk all by herself, just $34.97. The Adventures of Dizzy and Micro Machines for Nintendo, $59.86 each. Duracell copper top batteries, $147 and $177 after $2 rebate. Kmart, the quality you need, the price you want.
The trouble with Honey Nut Cornflakes is they're just too good to miss. People will do just about anything for that light taste of honey and real nuts. Sprinkled on crunchy flakes of corn. Kellogg's Honey Nut Corn Flakes. The trouble is, they taste too good.
Round 2 of the Middle East Peace Conference began in Washington today, but it was brief and pointless. A major player, Israel, wasn't there. It refuses to come until Monday, so the Arabs had nobody to talk to. Negotiators representing Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and the Palestinians went to the State Department where the meeting was supposed to be held. But after half an hour, they gave up. They called Israel's decision to stay away an insult to the world.
We look at this very seriously. It is an indication that the Israelis are not as serious as we are in search for peace.
But Israel says it will be there, just late, and it says a few days' delay isn't asking for too much.
If they won't be there, then I think it will be a living proof that they are really not interested for meaningful negotiations. They were just interested in an excuse.
With me to deal with today's situation regarding the Middle East Peace Conference are 2 Middle East experts, Hatif Kabersi, McMaster University in Hamilton, Janice Stein, University of Toronto. Janice, what's really going on here? Why didn't the Israelis choose to show up today?
Lloyd, this is really an argument about who will control the agenda in the future
and about the substance of the negotiations. It's the date and the timing are really not at the heart of the matter. Israel has made its point. The United States has made its point. Neither side has backed down. Each has read the other quite closely. But what's really important, Lloyd, is that these negotiations will go ahead early next week. The process is not that fragile that it has not survived this kind of bump in the road.
Atif, what's your view?
I think the process will continue, but I think the Americans and the Israelis have different agendas, and the Israelis have challenged the Americans and have won. The question is now, to what extent will the Americans, to protect and preserve the process, will be ready to absorb this humiliation and come back with measures that will bring the two parties together. But definitely it seems like the Israelis have different agendas than what the Americans have set for them.
Did the Arabs win a small public relations victory today?
I think they did, indeed. They've shown and demonstrated that they're willing to come anytime, any place, and willing to absorb some of the costs and some of the difficulties, as some of members of the Palestinian delegation were not granted visas to come to the United States. But indeed they came, and they're willing to sit, and they've demonstrated that. The Israelis have lost on that.
Janice, does the current release of the hostages have any impact on these talks?
Oh, I think it does, Lloyd. What we are seeing is that negotiations are going on in the Middle East, even though they appear not to be going on in Washington right now. This was a comprehensive deal negotiated through the United Nations with Syria, with Iran, and with Israel. All the loose ends were tied up. And in fact, the Israeli negotiator, Uri Lubrani, who has been heavily involved in these negotiations, will probably be in Washington next week. So we are seeing negotiations going on, even though not in Washington right now.
Just a quick response from each of you to this question. What happens next?
I think the negotiations will begin either Monday or Tuesday of next week. There will be more wrangling, both about the agenda and about the timing. But unfortunately, Lloyd, in Middle East diplomacy, procedure is often substance. You can't really separate them.
The process appears to be a little bit more elastic than people might have wished and wanted, but the process seems to be continuing, and there would perhaps be tremendous pressure on the Israelis from the Americans, maybe to even start before Monday.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Good night, Lloyd.
Good night, Lloyd.
Former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke threw his hat into the race today for the 1992 U.S. presidential election. Duke said he'll be challenging George Bush for the Republican Party's presidential nomination. Duke's announcement comes just 3 weeks after the former neo-Nazi lost the Louisiana governor's race. Analysts say he has little chance of winning the nomination, but could rack up enough votes to embarrass the Republican Party and the White House. Pan American, one of the world's oldest commercial airlines, stopped flying today. The company had been in financial trouble for months and finally ran out of money. 7,500 people are out of work and thousands of passengers were left stranded. Libya has detained 2 suspects wanted in the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. The 2 men, Abdul Basit Ali Mohammed Al Maghrabi and Alamin Khalifa Fima, are wanted by Britain and the United States. When we return, windows to the world, classrooms that travel under the sea.
What do you see in the Christmas clock, Katie?
I see a big Christmas puzzle. Close your eyes, Grandpa.
Why?
It might be for you.
It's just 3 weeks to Christmas, and Zellers has holiday savings like men's sweaters only $19.97, 30% off ladies' fox sweaters only $16.97.
I think I know what was in that box, Katie.
Did you peek, Grandpa?
It was full of Christmas hugs.
And kisses.
Ladies, now you can enjoy beautiful hair-free legs for weeks at a time with the Lady Remington Smooth and Silky. Lady Remington Smooth and Silky is not a shaver. It's a hair removal system with a soft, rotating roller. Lady Remington Smooth and Silky. Hair-free legs for weeks at a time. For salon-perfect manicures and pedicures, the Lady Remington Smooth and Shapely. And for quick, thorough nail polish removal, the Lady Remington Polish Away.
Kellogg's Corn Flakes Family Christmas on CTV presents A Bunch of Munch. First, little Thomas really hates his ugly brown snowsuit until everybody gets one just like it. And then, what do you do when your dad sleepwalks in the middle of winter? Just by watching these great family specials, you could win a set of Robert Munch books. Look in December's issue of Chatelaine magazine for details. A Bunch of Munch, a Kellogg's Corn Flakes Family Christmas Special, Saturday on CTV.
You there, boy! What time is it?
Why, it's Christmas time, sir.
Do you know the Canadian Tire down the street?
Yes, sir.
Do you know the Casio keyboard they carry?
The one with 61 full-size keys for just $289.99 this week?
Oh, delightful, boy. And the Casio SF4100 digital diary.
With 32K memory for only $89.99 this week?
Bring them to me and there's $1 in it for you.
$5 and you got a deal.
Canadian Tire lets you give like Santa and save like Scrooge.
It's often difficult to get kids interested in science class. After all, chemistry, physics, and geology are tough subjects. But there is a new program that's turning students into eager scientific explorers. Thousands of children from across North America are going to the Galapagos Islands without ever setting foot on an airplane. It's made possible by the magic of satellites. Sean Poulter reports.
Today, we're bringing you our field notes live by way of satellite. In fact,
these students are studying science in a way their parents would never have imagined.
Hi, kids. Well, we're down here about 30 feet, and the focus of our research here is to look at the interactions between plant and animals.
They are watching live pictures of life a continent away, learning about science from the scientists.
It will remove this animal to protect its territory. They're very pugnacious little guys.
This is the Jason Project, a school without walls, created by Dr. Robert Ballard, the man who photographed the Titanic. For the next 2 weeks, 500,000 children across Canada and the United States will be brought face to face with living science.
I think the excitement today was the children realizing that there was a seal flicking its nose with flies while they were sitting here and outside there was snow.
It is also changing the way they learn.
All right, we'll go to our second question. In Dallas, a tag, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Already, some of the students use keypads to talk directly to their underwater teachers. They can even take the controls to fly the Jason robot.
Well, I think it was really neat just to think that you were, these people are doing, talking to you at the same time, almost.
Harold is a volcanologist, and he'll talk about how geologists are like detectives.
These lessons are free. Electronic Data Systems wants to bring this technology to corporations. And teachers say what children learn here may give them a lifelong gift, a love of science.
The more hands-on, the more excitement we can give these kids, I think the better chance we'll have of holding them, keeping them in science and getting them involved in technology.
For the generations brought up on blackboards and school textbooks, learning live may all seem a little overwhelming. But for today's students, the world really is their classroom. Next year, they'll be learning about science in the Sea of Cortez off Mexico. Sean Poulter, CTV News, Ottawa.
And that's the news for this December the 4th. Tomorrow on Canada AM, Eric Lindros talks about his continuing dispute with the Quebec Nordique, and the political panel looks at the Canadian economy. On our agenda for CTV News, Terry Anderson returns to the United States, and Prime Minister Mulroney's road trip hits Edmonton. I'm Lloyd Robertson for all of us here at CTV News. Good night.
Christopher Plummer in Counterstrike, Saturday on CTV.
And a very pleasant good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Gibney, and welcome to our Lotto 649 draw. It is Wednesday, December the 4th of 1991. And tonight our draw is supervised by Fanny LeMagerie of Montreal Trust, and the official recorder is Rodney Davis of the firm Pete Marwick Thorne Chartered Accountants. And as you can see, our machine has been loaded with balls numbered from 1 to 49. So let's load up the drum, and while the balls are mixing, I'll tell you there was no winner of last Saturday's Lotto 649 jackpot prize pool of over $2.9 million. The next